It's on. Hang on.
Okay, sounds good.
Three, two, one. I am 98.6% sure it's on that we are live.
Yeah, I think we are too. It told me that we
Started giving me a bit of echo. Well, hang on. I need to change the.
are.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It must
Hello,
be Saturday. Welcome back to Unstoppable Live. It's your buddy Simon with Monique, all the way from
everyone.
the crazy place.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever said where we're all the way from, or we don't say it very often. So you're all the way from Europe over there, and I'm all the way from the US over here.
Yeah, across the pond.
Yes.
So, welcome, everybody. Today, we have an extra special show for you.
Oh, it's extra special.
Well, it's always an extra special show, but this one is extra, extra special. Why? It's not at all. I'm just making that up. So, today, we are going to be looking at a very good question, which is, what's an excuse that you've used this week? Now, why are we looking at this? Why are we looking at excuses that we might be using? The reason why we're looking at it is because quite often in life, what we tend to do is we tend to blame what's going on outside of us instead of taking responsibility for what's going on and what part we can actually change or what we can actually do to influence things or make things better. We just point the finger and blame somebody or something else. It could be the weather. It could be it could be your friend. It could be your mum. It could be that darn I don't know. It's you. It's about you pointing your finger outside of yourself and blaming somebody or something else that's going wrong, and perhaps not taking responsibility for things that you could make better yourself. So that's the question that we are looking at this week. And now I'm going to hand over to Mo to give us an amazing story which backs it up.
So, Simon, thank you for that great introduction because I'm going to tell everybody that this is my intent. I want to share with you two quick stories because I've got two kind of different examples that I think will illustrate this point about sometimes we can take responsibility instead of pointing the finger and blaming something outside of ourselves or someone outside of ourselves. So, the first example of this I have when I was younger, I had the blessing and the privilege to walk to school when I was about 10 or 11 years old. Here in the US, we call that fifth grade. I was able to walk to school. And I had this obsession with carrying my books, and my family, we were very, very engaged in our community. So almost every weeknight, we would be going to church and doing, activities with other people. And sometimes we would be out late, and I would be a little bit tired because, when you go to school and you pay attention and then you play outside like kids did back in the day, we didn't have gaming systems. So we would play and then go do these other activities and sometimes come home late. I had the privilege or the challenge sometimes that I would oversleep. And my grandmother, who was my caretaker, had a pretty simple and kind of tough expectation. She did me a favor every morning, a very kind gesture to come and tell me to wake up. It's time to get ready for school. But if I didn't get out of the bed, then I would miss school. I would miss school. So there is one really great instance where I probably had a couple of opportunities to be a little frustrated because I loved school. I didn't want to miss school. But, I don't know who hasn't had that moment where you hang on to the sheets and you pretend you don't hear your name being called and you tell yourself what I'm going to call a lie right now. Oh, if I just get one more minute, I'll be better. So I would sleep a couple of times. I would like pretend I didn't hear, or, tell myself something that probably wasn't true. Oh, I'll remember. I'll get up in just a minute. And I overslept and missed the bus and had to walk to school. And I could have taken the position that I was annoyed. But I mean, the reality is that I could have just used, right now, they call it a 5-second rule, like just count to 5 and roll out of bed. But I didn't do that intentionally because I wanted a little more sleep. And really, nobody else was to blame. It was my choice. And my grandmother helped me learn from my mistake a very simple way. I missed school. Good old fashioned consequence. I loved school. I wanted to be at school. I wanted to learn. I did not want to spend a boring day at home with no gaming systems and no one to play with. This was the old days. Like, I needed to go to school. That's where the fun was happening. So I learned the lesson the hard way, but I say that story as an example to say that I could point my finger and be frustrated that my grandmother didn't come into my room and tell me, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 times that I needed to get up. Or I could have just taken responsibility, which ultimately I had to learn how to do, to roll out of bed when she let me know it was time to wake up. And there were mornings where it was hard, but taking ownership of that, I can say that I only had that experience a couple of times, like maybe twice. Owning responsibility, I was able to turn that around. And the answer was roll out of bed, go splash some water on your face. You think you need more sleep, but you'll feel fine once you move. So that's the one story. The second story that I want to share is an example that really involves like peers. Because sometimes we can be frustrated with our parents, but, I don't know if we ever really get mad at them, but we do blame them for things and we think they should do more to make us have it easier or whatever. This example is a story where I was having a conflict with a peer. And again, it's a story about when I was younger, Simon. So I have a relative, let's just say a cousin, who was similar in age to me, a few years younger and older, excuse me. And for some reason, as a child, I have these memories that this person just gave me a really hard time. I don't want to say that they didn't like me, but they were always just giving me a really, really hard time. Like back then, I probably said that they were mean, and I know a lot of kids have a sibling that they think is mean to them, that they give them a hard time, that maybe they do things that aren't fair a lot. And I spent a number of years, I'm embarrassed to say, from around age 9, around age 8 or 9, up until probably what we call high school here in the US. So in my late teens, maybe around 16. So this is a saga, guys. I'm having conflict with the same person, much like a brother or sister. We spent a lot of quality time together for years. And I was always carrying this message. So I wanted to share this story because this was not one where in 2 times I learned my lesson, flipped the script, and now all of a sudden I'm responsible and everything's better. I'm getting up and I'm making it to school. No, this went on for years. I was constantly telling myself the story that this person isn't fair. Everything's their fault. They're not nice. Everything would be better if they would just, if this cousin would just do whatever differently, everything would be better. We wouldn't be having difficulty. We wouldn't be getting in trouble. We wouldn't be having a bad day. We wouldn't be in a bad mood. We wouldn't be having conflict. And I can remember almost like it was yesterday that around the time that I turned about 17 or 18, something finally like clicked in my brain. And I just noticed what was going on when myself and this other person were having conflict. And I thought about how every time there was a problem between us, I was contributing to the problem, even if I wasn't the one who started it. Maybe I didn't pick the fight. Maybe I didn't say the mean comment. Maybe I didn't do the thing that I was framing as unfair. But every single time I participated by responding, by having some kind of reaction, by doing something that made the situation be even more of a conflict. So when I noticed that, If I change the way I responded, the whole situation shifted a little bit. I literally, without telling anybody, I did this for years, you all. I did it starting at around age 17, 18, all the way through college. The other person never even knew. I hope they don't watch this show. I've tried to disguise the description of who they might be, but I did an experiment with
What's the
myself.
name again?
I did an experiment with myself where, Simon, literally, I was able to turn that relationship around from what I described was probably more than 8 years of what felt like agony and suffering to me. I'm not exaggerating. This is the way that it was framed. It was awful. I hated it. It literally diffused into nothing. It diffused into zero conflict because I practiced one itty bitty tweak at a time, how not to respond in a way that just made me sink into drama and frustration with this person. So I'll give you an example. Let's say sometimes, like if you've got a sibling, I said this was a cousin, now we know it's not. But in any case, let's say one of the silly things that some people live with you, like when you're doing the laundry, the other person takes your socks. If you're a particular person like me, you don't like it when someone else is wearing your socks. Your socks are for your stinky feet only. So and it's funny because now I have kids, and my daughter, I saw her the other day at someone else's house with my socks on, and it took me back to this moment where, I first had the drama when I was younger, obsessed about who's wearing whose socks. So clearly to the other person, it's not a big deal. They're not even seeing it as a problem. They're wearing the socks. And they don't see it the same way I do. I'm frustrated with this. So I say something to the individual. Hey, you took my socks. You're always taking my things, blah, blah, blah about my socks. And in this example, what I learned to do was to be a little bit more intentional about my things, like not leave my socks around when I do my laundry, put them away, to take ownership of what I could be doing. If my socks got out of place, I didn't have to pick a fight with the other person. I just went and got my socks. When I'm putting my laundry away and I notice I don't have all my socks, I go and collect my socks. I take responsibility for what I can do instead of making the other person responsible for fixing it or agreeing with me or joining me. They don't have to do that. This is an example over something physical. Me and this person got into a lot of what I would call word fights growing up, where I felt like I needed to defend myself. And I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it happened a lot. So I want to use an example like that as well. Something, that's not physical. So your sibling didn't take your shirt or your socks. Now it's the kind of conflict where someone has said something or done something that you feel is rude or mean, and you don't want to get into drama with them, to be mad and have all of the negative energy. So in those instances, I just practiced not joining the person in the negative reaction. If they accused me of something, then I owned responsibility for the way that they perceived what I did to them. They said that I said something, I didn't mean it that way. I immediately said, I'm sorry that upset you. I wasn't trying to offend you. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. If the person would allow me, I would clarify the message that I intended to give. If they wouldn't, then I let them be upset and accepted that I don't have to be upset with them because I know that my intent was not to hurt them, and move on, instead of doing what I did for many, many years, which is like, now I've got to pout and be upset and go to my room and cry and, have a bad day and tell myself this story that my life is awful because I'm always having conflict with this person. And Simon, I think the way that I just described this scenario was maybe too fast and too thick. But the one thing that I want to say at the end of it is, it wasn't like a magical one day we didn't have any conflict anymore because I changed the way I was thinking about our conflict. It wasn't that. It was a little bit more like I was practicing this habit of noticing the way I was behaving and just doing what now I would say is, I ask myself, like, how do I want to show up in this situation? Do I want to be the person who's in a fight? No, I don't. So what makes me not be the person in a fight? It makes me be the person who's willing to say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, and just let it go. I don't need to be right. I don't need to prove them wrong. I just need to be in peace. And it makes it so easy or so simple what I noticed over years, so probably around the time now I'm in about my early 20s, I literally was never having conflict with this person anymore. Never having conflict with this person anymore. That's not to say that I never had anything to have conflict over, because sometimes the person's personality was very pesky. There came a time where the person did something that was really mean, and honestly, it hurt my feelings. But when that happened, it was not anything like the past. It was a little bit more like, I realized that sometimes this person does this kind of thing. It's not even about me. I didn't take it personally at that point. I was able to just move on, decide how I wanted to behave, and go on with my day, and well, go on with my years. So I know that you're going to have something to add to this, Simon, but sometimes we have, and we both have worked a lot with young people. So sometimes I have kids or teens that I'm working with, my own children, who can be really frustrated with interactions that they have with people, or things that we encounter that we feel are at fault because they're outside of our control. But the thing that I want to point out here is a philosophy that I live by even in my adulthood, and that is to take responsibility for myself, because I can always control 100% of what I do. I always have a choice about how I respond, even in the trickiest, toughest situations. I literally believe that, and I tell myself that because it gives me the best position, and I'm going to put up air quotes right here, to choose how I show up when it feels like things aren't going the way that I would like for them to go. So I don't know what you would add to that, or, listening, if there's something that you think maybe needs to be cleaned up, Simon, but hopefully those are some good examples that will help our friends who listen to this episode.
Yeah, thank you, Mo. So a couple of great examples there. And one thing that I did notice was that both examples were about other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, this really is a very big reason, quite a lot of the time, for our misery is the way that other people act and the way that other people behave. And so in Mo's first example, it was very easy for her to point the finger at her grandmother uh, and and why didn't you get me up? Why didn't you remind me? Like like Mo's grandma was supposed to be, was supposed to have some sort of snooze button where you could
She
just
was
come,
the
so
snooze
she'd
button.
come in and wake you up, and you just kind of like tap the top of her head, and then she'd come back in 5 minutes, and actually, yeah, you just tap the snooze button again, and then she'll come back in another 5 minutes, and eventually you'll get up. So most grandma made a decision to I suppose teach Mo a lesson, and in some way, although it was probably quite frustrating at the time, it probably helped. The second example also, was about people and the way that they behave, and how changing something small within yourself and taking a little bit of responsibility for what's going on, instead of pointing the finger outside and, oh, he's so mean. Oh, why is he taking my stuff? That I left lying around. Um, um, and instead of pointing the finger, starting to take responsibility. So in the end, why do we want to do that? Well, we want to do that because, well, it levels up our game. It 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 makes our life easier because we can rely on us. And like Mo said, we have full control over that. What we
Mhm.
don't have is control over other people and how they act and behave. So, really, what happened? I mean, I'd love to talk more about that second example of yours, Mo. I think we could have a really interesting conversation around that. Maybe that would be for another time. I'm not too sure. I'd be really interested to know kind of, what changed inside you to actually make you just, um, you know, uh, um, to to make you come up with this strategy, which in the end really worked. It was so interesting. Maybe you tried a whole bunch of stuff before, including the finger pointing and the blaming, which just wasn't working. But in the end, it's looking at with people and circumstances not fitting into the picture of what we want, how we want them to behave, or how we want things to be going on. There's two ways in which we can react, and one is to point outside of ourselves, and one is to look inside ourselves and see what we can change, what we can take control of, and how we can make the situation better ourselves. Now, one thing that we did talk about were, just the small excuses which we use as well, which perhaps sound a little something like, oh, I didn't have time to do my homework this evening, so that's you going to your teacher the next day who's asking you why you haven't brought your homework in. Oh, well, I didn't have time. That's another one, a very common excuse that we use. I don't have time. Um, uh, you know, why would we actually do that? Well, it's it's just an excuse. But how can we actually take control of that? Well, taking control of how we organize ourselves and our priorities as well in our life is very important. So that was just a small example which I thought I'd bring to the table of something of an example where we might make excuses for our own behavior about things which we did or didn't do when we weren't blaming people or circumstances outside of ourselves. Yeah, so I th I think those stories were absolutely brilliant, and perhaps we will come um, back to Mo on another occasion because the time's ticking on. So Mo, I'll hand it back to you.
I think we should challenge these guys to try this out, Simon.
You know how much we love a good challenge.
Apparently, we like a challenge every week. We don't like to take a break from challenges. So
Yeah.
I love the example that you just gave because, to be fair, I've been guilty of saying I didn't have time for this and that in my life.
Who hasn't?
And I like the idea of a way to own responsibility for that is to set priorities or to set reminders or do something to help yourself with the way you use your time better. um, and I've had a lot of experience where just doing something like that has made such a big difference. So if any of these guys have had experiences where perhaps they didn't have enough, they thought they didn't have enough time, or they didn't complete something because they thought someone else was going to do it. I love that one. Or
Mm.
they didn't understand, so they quit. It's like, what could we do instead in each of those instances? And you came up with some really good examples. So I didn't know how. Instead of so I quit, I didn't know how, so I asked for help, right? Like,
Right.
or I didn't have time, so I rearranged my schedule. Or I thought someone else was going to do it. I love this one. So I asked to check, to be sure, to confirm that I didn't need to take responsibility for that action.
Communication.
What I would love to challenge these guys to do, because it's going to be very brave work to notice where we make excuses and allow ourselves not to show up as our best, most responsible, self-ownership selves. I would challenge you guys to notice at least one excuse that you make this week. So you made excuses last week, but this week I'm going to ask you to notice at least one excuse that you make. And like we've talked about today, I want you to reframe it. I want you to flip it and tell me where would be the way that you could take ownership in that situation. And I dare you a positive dare. I dare you to try it, right? So you're going to notice yourself making the excuse like, I didn't have time, so I didn't finish this task. And instead, you're going to flip it to something like, I thought I might not have enough time, so I rearranged my schedule to allow time for this task. And if you can find a way to do this, then I want you to actually practice it. Okay. So you're going to notice it, you're going to reframe it, and then you're going to practice it. Like put it into practice. So if you always run out of time for your homework, like was Simon's example just now, what would happen if you come in from play a little bit earlier to get the homework done? Or what would happen if you practiced it by doing the homework before you go out to play? I don't know what your strategy is going to be that you try. But again, here's Monique's challenge for everyone this week. Notice an excuse that you make for yourself. That's number one. Reframe that excuse where you take ownership and responsibility to handle it. And then number three, I dare you for like bonus points to try it out and see what happens. There's 7 days in a week. If you notice an excuse on Monday, you've got plenty of time to practice it and see how things go. And share that with us, like we always invite you to on the Inspiration Station. We would love to hear, as Simon usually says, how you're getting on.
Yeah, we'd love to hear how you're getting on. We'd love you to try it out. And yeah, let's do it, guys. I'm gonna join in on this one this week,
Yes, yes, yes.
like I
We all
haven't done
should.
already. But yeah, so let's try it out, and you might have a huge shift like Mo had in her relationships. You might have a huge shift in, getting better grades and taking responsibility for actually doing your homework on time and improving. And instead of just kind of blundering through life and pointing your finger and blaming and tripping over everybody else, you can start taking responsibility for your actions and what you choose. And I actually thought very just to cap this off, I actually thought of a great phrase, a great saying, which I've heard I don't know where from before, and I don't know who said it, but I'm going to say it anyway and not quote the person. But the one that came to mind when you were talking then, Mo, was that a master is a person who takes control of what they can. And a disaster is a person who tries to control the things that they can't. So
Mm,
this is exactly what we're talking about all the way through this is instead of pointing outside and blaming other people who you can't control or other circumstances or the outside world, which is never going to be perfect, what we do is we look inside and we look at ways that we can choose and we can take control. And through doing that, we can become unstoppable.
yes.
Ain't that right?
Completely unstoppable, Simon. I believe that this is one of the secret keys to unstoppableness, as one of our mentors would say. Yeah.
Unstoppableness. Who says that? It's just a made up
That's a very Peter
word.
Stage kind of way to stick ness on the end of, some phenomenon. Yeah.
Okay.
Fun.
Well, we believe in you guys. We
Yes.
believe in your unstoppableness.
You're
So,
unstoppable.
yeah, have a go, guys. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.